Okay, it's sending data. We're gonna see if it succeed. Okay, it looks like it succeeded. Okay, yeah. Yep, go to your homepage. I can see the stream is up. Your homepage, I can. Yep, go to your home. Yep, go to your homepage. I can see. Yep, it's there. Make sure you're audible because I'm not super sure if you can be heard on stream. And if not, I can adjust the volume settings accordingly. Let's see if it catches up. Let's see if it catches up. Yeah, and it seems to not be picking up your voice. So let me check my Discord settings very quickly because that could be something. That could be an issue on my end due to all the variants and outputs, etc. So let's change. Oh, that would, yeah, I see why you wouldn't be audible. Let's swap you to this. And now try speaking.
Yeah, it's not picking it up. I just ran numbers, and while you were talking, and then I heard you. Okay, now I'm getting it.
Yep, because I swapped the output. You were being basically fed directly to my headphones, so you weren't audible for stream. So I changed the audio source.
Okay, my volume is quite low.
If it's still low, then I can increase it. Speak for me one more time.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah,
that's much better.
Yep. Awesome, because I have
That's
this as a quick peek. I have this soundboard that I can control every audio input and output source. So no matter what's loud and what's not, I can modify it from that board.
Perfect. Yeah,
Alrighty.
that's nice to have a master audio control.
Yep, and that's the medium-sized version. There's a bigger one, and I might even swap to that too. That way I can do things like have your audio input be separate from a separate channel from the music and the main desktop. But that's more if I was like playing a game with music with Discord, you know?
Right.
But actually, that would also probably help with the AI thing. Oh yeah, but off track.
Yeah, so the Lover Lab stream is doing just fine now. It's got a few second lag between when what we say or see and then what you hear or see in the YouTube live stream. But that's fine. That's okay. Yeah.
That's to be because we're streaming at a pretty good quality. You can get lower latency, but you have to compromise on quality for that usually.
Yeah. No, the quality's good.
Yep, beautiful 1080. So the beauty of Restream as well is I can push a pretty high bit rate, and it's replicated across all of them because that is what you pay for.
Yeah, in fact, looking at the Zoom screen, I'm sorry, the Discord's video chat screen, up in the upper left, you have AI NPC project sentence, and on the upper left on the YouTube, it's pretty much the same resolution, maybe slightly fuzzier. Yeah. So everything's coming through really clean, really sharp.
Yep, that's the beauty of this setup, which is basically one computer is dedicated to handling all the stream processing, so I can do something like show you my screen in complete unmodified detail because distributing the workload helps each thing be higher quality.
Nice.
Trade-off too is it's very hot in here. That's why I have the air conditioning on.
Oh yeah, I can't hear it.
Beautiful. Alrighty. So let's get started with why we're here, Jim. You ready?
Why are we here?
Just to suffer.
I'm not a religious man, so I don't think it was because God created the heaven and the earth myself. I think it had more to do with natural evolution and processes. What do you think?
I'm here because I want to have anime characters talk to me, and this is a very roundabout way of doing so.
Oh, very utilitarian, not meta level. Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm here because I want NPC characters to be generative as far as AI is concerned, and also understand semantic context within the Ukraine Drone Warriors video game that we'll be developing as you might say a trial project for developing all sorts of different kinds of AI capabilities within Unity.
Very much so. All of these kinds of games, projects, and ideas will be under the banner of this completely work in progress name, please no judgment, of the AI NPC project.
Okay.
So
this
by the way, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been using Ukraine Drone Warriors for over a year now as the name of the website for the Ukraine drone stuff. And it suddenly occurred to me this morning, that's actually a pretty good name for a video game.
It is.
It actually is. And I've already got the URL for it. And so when we do some stuff online, in terms of donations and other such things, we're pretty much ready to go.
100%.
Yeah.
Is there any form of link you want me to shoot into chat in case anyone is curious to see more about the Ukraine Drone Warriors project specifically?
Yeah, if they want to get a bit of the history of what our drone projects have been since spring last year after the Russian invasion, they can go to ukrainedronewarriors.com and they'll see our website. They can look at various things that we've delivered to drone teams, some work on a particular drone that we worked on. I call it the Plastic Drone Project, and there's some videos and photos of it, and some other things about what we've been doing. The most recent work with the disposable drones isn't in there yet, but it should be there soon. And there's also, if anybody wants to donate, there's a link through to a Ko-fi site where they can go and donate money to our Ukraine project, which supports our video game development as well as designing and helping build drones for Ukraine drone teams.
Awesome. I put a link to that in all of the chats I have access to, and in the future, I think I might change High Good into Lovebird because I don't think it auto posts in there. So if you wanted, Jim, you can post that link into Lovebird.
Yeah, I'll just go edit it later and down in the more section.
Yep.
Drop it in.
Give it a little VOD touch up. But Ukraine Drone Warriors is one of many projects I want to work on under this AI NPC project banner.
Yes.
And the goal for this stream is to really flesh out what is the AI NPC project, what goes into an AI NPC, and what we'll hopefully be working on in the coming weeks. And I'm using this wonderful program called Obsidian to do the note-taking live because I need a good knowledge repository just to collect all of the information related to this project. And this was free, open source, and highly recommended by the one and only Jason Story. So I'm very happy to give it a try.
Yeah, Jason has, at the drop of a hat, recommends Obsidian. Whenever anybody is talking about sort of an online database or records database or note-taking and stuff like that, it's quite a program. I've looked at it. I haven't used it myself. Have you started working with it?
I've not started, but I know I'm very overdue to do so because the way I had been keeping my notes before had been kind of bootstrapped together. I was using a writing program I have a subscription to called Campfire, and I just been kind of slapping more and more notes into it over time, even for things it's probably not designed for, like programming and script writing. It's
Yeah,
great
I
for
see.
narrative stuff, but I have been feature creeping my notes into it far, far too often.
No, I got you. Yeah, I've been using well, actually I tried a bunch of different things, but I kept coming back to Microsoft's OneNote.
Hmm.
Which is really easy to use. Um and
One.
so I use it for tracking a ton of different things. And it comes with Microsoft's Office suite. So if you have the Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, is part of one of their suites. OneNote is a part of it.
Nice. I've never given OneNote a shot, but I've been using more and more Microsoft stuff lately, both for
Yeah.
work and pleasure, because that calendar email mixture does help for scheduling.
Oh yeah, sure.
But on that note, to get started with the very first file to christen our organization, what is the anatomy of an AI NPC? This was the question I started with when I had first started to actually work on these projects, because having an outline of what we're actually working toward making helps us follow some kind of recipe, keep us on track, and know what we are and are not missing.
Yes.
When I had started, there were a couple of ideas that came to mind for what really comprises an AI NPC as opposed to just a normal NPC inside of a video game. The first, of course, being a personality. This personality is more or less the concept of a character file that you can engage with and interact with. This can be seen expanded upon in... Let me find an example I've got. Actually, I have plenty of examples in Unity.
Yeah. While you're looking for an example, could you increase the font a lot on your outline there? It's pretty small.
Yeah. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that on my own. So I remember from the tutorial video, the ultimate command for me to remember how to do everything I need to do is Control P. So if I go to font...
Well, actually, maybe you could just zoom.
True. Zoom
Bet you
in.
zoom is, yeah, there you go.
Yep. What's the hotkey for zoom? It doesn't show a hotkey by default. Maybe it's just Control Scroll increases the font line specifically.
Oh, how cool. Very simple. Yeah,
Nice.
now that's much easier to read.
Yep, and we want it to be nice and big too, because this list isn't going to be long, but impactful.
Yes.
So I'm going to open this up, and actually let's use the good old GPT for Unity project where I built out a tool, which that tool will be expanded upon more as we describe. But for now, personality is the core concept of the character we're writing.
Right.
So with an AI, it needs to know who it's trying to be, right?
If that's the word personality, you should spell it correctly.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it?
No, it's not a big deal.
I right click and auto corrected it to the first thing I saw. And the first thing I saw was not the word personality.
Nice.
But personality, the core, the root by which all other elements of your AI NPC grows out of.
Yeah, some kind of profile also.
That's included in it. So
is it? Okay.
Yeah. And actually, because this is loaded up, I can show you. This is a tool I had built in order to help interacting with AIs to be easier inside of Unity. And an example file that's provided is this Chiharu Yamada character. So everything in this JSON file is a default character personality. So you could load this up. Okay.
These are all of the character parameters, I guess you'd call them.
Yep. It breaks down core elements like, of course, their name, so they know who to refer themselves as. The persona line is a short description of their behavior. So in this case, young computer engineer, knack for solving problems and passion for technology. Disclaimer, I did not write this. Do not think I wrote this for a moment. This is the default character that's provided from the text generation web UI. So I absolve any and all criticism for the character writing. It's still a good character.
Blame them. It's cool. Not your fault. They made you do it. I got it.
Yep. I literally a gun pointed to my head.
Yeah.
You can have something known as a world scenario to give context to the environment the character is in. I've left this blank for now, but it does help if you wanted them to react to certain elements, like we're in a very scary wartime scenario, for example, or we're chilling at home.
You could define all sorts of things like there's a war on and it's dangerous outside and it's hard to find food and it's cold. You know, all sorts of attributes of the world scenario, the world context. Does that sound correct?
Yep, exactly correct.
Okay.
We've then also have the character greeting. So this is arguably one of the most important parameters, because this is technically the first message the AI sends, and it's pre-written. The concept when it comes to text generative AIs, which is generally the kind of large language model you're using to create these characters, is it uses probability to determine what should it say next. So it follows along an equation that it has internally using weights and far more complicated terminology that I'm going to get into for our introduction. But this greeting sets the tone for how it should continue to speak to you. So in this case, it gives a little descriptor using asterisk saying that she strides into the room with a smile, lighting up when she sees you. It describes what she's wearing for her context, so the AI is aware, okay, this is the general equipment and clothing of the character it's representing. It says she sits next to you.
This kind of sets up a point of departure for emotion, the nature of your relationship and so on, and then it starts changing depending on what's said, events, and other such things. It could have said, da-da-da comes in, glares at you, says some rude things, doesn't like you at all, da-da-da, and that would have set the starting point for subsequent conversation that could over time perhaps evolve and become friendly, but the point of departure would have been argumentative, somewhat aggressive, unfriendly. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, it's very much how we start off the conversation, and it contextualizes her immediate next responses. So in this case, they have her start off very friendly and very open to talking to you, and specifically she wants to talk to you about technology. So this is a very fascinating part. I'm getting lost inside the JSON file, but I'll break it out into, just make it full screen, so a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, okay.
So she mentions that she really wants to talk to you about computers, and she knows that you are a very smart person about computers, which is a key bit of context for how she's interacting with you. And then she says, well, let's just get started. She will now promptly continue to ask you questions along this line of she wants you to tell her more about technology, and she is very interested in learning about technology. And of course she says, let's get started. And it even introduces the idea of her talking in description. So sometimes you can scrub out the idea of the AI ever giving you descriptors with these asterisks, but in this case we want her to do this. So whenever she has a reaction or an action, it'll be spelled out for us using asterisks.
Okay. Can those?
Oh, go ahead.
Can then those things which essentially are describing a physical attribute be linked to a 3D character and its facial expression or body language?
So they very much can be, and we're gonna get more into that because as a spoiler, emotion is a whole section on its own, just because it's very intricate for how it intersects with all of this.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so you're saving emotion for a bit, but personality is things like the name, persona, and the greeting we've set up. The next important part of the anatomy of an AI NPC is its memory. What does it know, and what will it continue to know? How does it learn? That is all contained inside of this example dialogue item here.
So how did you get into computer? I always loved Okay.
So let me break this out because this line is deceptively long. Like each backslash.
No, I figured it. If it was going to be with a lot of information related to memory, I thought it would probably be very long.
Yep, each backslash is a new line break.
Yeah.
And I'll wrap it all in a quotation mark so it's more readable in a bit. But it is a lot of practice lines of her talking with you and preparing for how she wants to interact with you. So actually, this line is entirely optional because it's just a restatement of the first message.
Okay. Could you click away from that so it's not highlighted, because it's hard to read it on screen?
Yep, the reason it's highlighted that way is because it's a JSON file, so when it's not wrapped in quotation marks, it shows you that that's basically invalid text.
Trends, computer hardware, like puzzles in the backboard. That's great. Okay. So this is, let's say, a conversation that the player had with Yamada at an earlier time, and it creates the context for continued conversation. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's exactly a small interview that the player more or less has with Yamada outside before anything's ever happened. This conversation has already happened, and it's being fed to Yamada every time she responds. She remembers this conversation, even though you never said this. We're pre-priming her with the same knowledge.
Understood. So really, the word memory is kind of analogous to history.
Yes.
Okay.
And memory is very important because of the way we interact with AI LLMs. You need to pass in all relevant memories every time you want her to respond.
Okay.
So the whole history every time.
Okay, so the history continues to essentially concatenate with new questions, new responses, and such. And every time you come in and you have a new conversation, that history is accessible, and it helps drive the current conversation.
Yep. Okay. And as the history continues to add on, you could say, ask her for reference another one of these questions. So if I were to ask her how she got into computer engineering again, she probably wouldn't make up a new answer. She would try to reference the fact that she already has given an answer previously here.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so the character, the NPC, is parsing the history and integrating that into whatever the new response is going to be.
Yes.
Okay, simple.
Yep. And from there, that's the concept of memory. It's generally easy to understand. The difficult part is, as conversations go on, most models have an upper limit in terms of the sheer number of tokens they're able to handle. So tokens are the memory representation of string content they're parsing.
Okay, so a token, does that represent something like 256 characters or what?
It's It's a bit more complicated, and it might change from LLM to LLM, but generally you can figure out how many tokens a particular string has through things like a tokenizer. So OpenAI generously provides us with like a free tokenizer here. So it'll take text and process it as a number of tokens, which is just a sequence of characters.
And since tokens relate to the fees charged for use, correct?
Yes.
Usually? Yeah. Then it's, okay, got it.
So here we can see just the conversation history when input is about 184 tokens.
Oh, okay. 651 characters. It's probably not that if you divided 651 by 184, it probably wouldn't mean that it was that many characters per token, or maybe it would.
It's roughly that, but as you can see, it doesn't conceptualize each word the exact same way. So you can see it broke out this U to be a specific segment, and then discolors them.
Each one of these distinct color blocks represents a token.
You can see each of them converted to their respective like token IDs.
I got it. Okay, all right.
Yep. And this is important because even if you were to be using a cloud AI service, it represents how much you'll of course be charged, the processing power
that's
needed.
right. That's
But
right.
since we're using local AIs, it represents the upper tokenizer limit of our model. So just how much it can even handle at once before it just kind of breaks. And our performance requirements, because the more tokens you pass in, the worse or the longer it'll take for the AI to respond, just because it's doing more work.
Is it possible to move tokenized text from active memory to like disk memory?
So
Caches?
yes, it is. This would be a feature to be implemented by your game engine itself. So this will never be provided out the box for you. But memory management is an entire service for any developer who wants to implement this to think about. You do not want all memory the user ever has to be implemented to your AI. So you would need some form of way to shift active memory to disk memory and determine what forms of disk memory to use in your active memory and how to store it.
Yeah, and under what contexts and what sort of events would you there go and look through the cache and grab stuff, and of course that would cause lag. Well, anyway, so there's a number of things you need to look at, obviously, in terms of storing history and then accessing it either in active memory or some kind of disk storage.
Yeah, and there are, hopefully we'll get to them in this stream, but there are some existing solutions in order to make this easy for you, but we'll see, because right now we're just outlining what we'll need, and then from there I'll go through there is a tool for every aspect of this outline I'll be writing out. That's one guarantee I can promise you.
Got it.
So after memory, the next two are somewhat intertwined, and I'll be explaining them together. And that's the concept of senses and the concept of interaction.
There's no C in senses. Oh, there you go.
Yep. That's why I've got the good old automatic spell checker. I already outsourced my spelling to AIs.
It's cool. Yeah. You could pretty soon you'll be outsourcing your talking to AI.
Well, TTS is the secret sixth option, but that's the bonus requirement, you know.
Yeah, really. So senses, right?
Yeah. So with senses, this is a broad descriptor I've come up with to describe your AI's ability to receive information that we are then translating into information to query it. So a very real example is, let's say we have our 3D NPC walking around our forest environment, and it has now bumped into a tree. If you want your AI to be able to respond to that, it needs to be able to understand its environment and modify that environment variable we looked at before accordingly.
Yes.
So it's effectively a way to dynamically change what our world scenario is. Understanding the context of the situation has very much changed, and it must now respond in kind.
So that it didn't respond to everything that it ran into, you'd obviously want to have some kind of a list of things that were important, that it might bump into. So, for example, if it bumped into a bear, you'd probably want to record that. You know, that might go into history in some form. And then later on, when talking to somebody, I might say, "Have you seen any bears?" And the NPC character said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I saw one over by blah blah blah." Okay.
Very much so.
Yeah. So it has to have some kind of mental map of the 3D space. And I guess you could call that history.
In a way, the reason I distinguish senses from normal memory and history is senses are the gameplay mechanic by which we insert additional information into this.
Senses is input, and memory is storage.
Yes.
Of let's say that input, or events, or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's quite distinct. Now it's interesting that you have senses and interaction triggers separated. Now, are you suggesting that senses has more to do with environmental information and interaction triggers is something different?
Yes. So the distinction is senses is generally more environment related. So again, the world scenario segment. The interaction and triggers is a way for you to immediately force some form of shift in the AI. Because as game developers, even though generative AI is dynamic and cool and has infinite possibilities, you want some level of control over it. So in your game, a dramatic character has died. You don't want to let the AI entirely decide that situation, meaning there's a chance that it just laughs and finds that very funny. You want to force it to be sad of some sort, to have a generally curated reaction, but still be able to dynamically operate within those parameters. And that's where triggers come in.
So in senses, the NPC might bump into a bear, and in interaction, it would run away.
Yes, that's a great distinction, because triggers would be preset ways for us to respond to different forms of sense stimuli. So bumping into a bear has now happened. So the way we would do this in our game is we would actually change likely the first message parameter. So the character greeting. The way actually, no, it's down here, this first message parameter. This could be changed into, you have just bumped into a bear and you are terrified and are attempting to run away. You can basically force the AI to have certain thoughts and follow along with certain ideas, because the way generative LLMs work is they continue with what they should be doing based on prior information. It's a probability thing. So you can influence the probability by feeding it lines for, you should be afraid, start running, and it will pick up the story from there and be able to conjecture, how does this character with this history respond to, I should be running? And now you have it running.
Here's a thought. Let's just say you have a character who bumps into a bear, and there isn't an interaction trigger that's structured for that, but the character has a certain set of what can I call it? Constraints or goals, like, and one goal might be stay alive. So the character bumps into the bear, and the character just stands there, and the bear kills the character. Well, the character presumably just learned something. So the next time the character bumped into the bear, I got
Bears
killed
dangerous.
that time. I should do something else. Maybe I should tell it a joke. No, I got killed. Okay, next time I bump not. So the bear is being trained. I'm sorry. Maybe the bear is being trained too. I don't know.
It was trained to kill. Okay, it's getting really good at it.
Yeah, but the NPC is learning the consequences of doing certain things or not doing things, and over time it develops its own set of triggers that fulfill its goals of stay alive, whatever the other set of baseline goals might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the goals. So this item was not always on this anatomy list, but I realized how important it was the more I worked with, let's say, in-world AI, which specifically has a mechanic about goals and action triggers. And I realized that value, and this is one of the reasons why in-world is so strong with its characterization. The idea of setting up goals and reactions to trying to achieve those goals in specific scenarios adds a lot of life to the character and allows you to start crafting more specific and more curated experiences. So just the goal of stay alive would play into all of these other elements. So when it senses a bear that reasonably conceptualizes like danger, its goal of stay alive will allow it to naturally decide to run, even if you didn't pre-script it to run.
Yeah, and in fact, it could learn that certain behaviors work in terms of staying alive, and other behaviors don't, like punch the bear in the nose, or or like I said, tell the bear a joke. Some of these things don't actually fulfill the goal of stay alive, so that one drops off the interaction trigger list. And so as time goes by, there are these possible list of things that an NPC could do. I guess you'd have to start with that. Is what are all the things that an NPC could do?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would initially, I guess, randomly choose from those things and kind of test that response and see how well it went. And then the next time it bumped into the bear, if that response worked, then it could use that response and it would have learned now how to handle bears. So what this suggests is that developing a game like this has a phase where the whole game is evolving. All the characters are learning. And when it gets to a certain level of learning and of evolution and sophistication, then the game's ready to play. Because the NPCs now are responding realistically. They've evolved their own responses and approaches to things. And if it's really got a large selection of possible responses, the NPCs could actually be responding in a number of different ways, and would seem like they had very distinct characters. Does that make sense?
Yep. The one distinction I'd want to make is there are, broadly speaking, when we talk about like AI in games, there are two big categories, which is the kind of text generation LLM and reinforcement learning. You described is a bit of both of those, but with the personality and the anatomy of an AI NPC, this mostly leans on the textual generation aspect. So the idea of learning dynamically through interactions, you can add in elements of that reinforcement, so it has ways to weight certain actions based on goals, and it figures that out through trial and error and preset ways you initialize. But with an AI NPC, let's say if it was just like a purely dialogue-based game, you don't necessarily need to force it to have interactions to learn. You can already give it kind of a broad goal through this trigger of I need to live. So when it senses a bear, it will reasonably try to escape. Even if it doesn't get multiple chances to learn, you can basically preload it with enough knowledge to generally make the decisions you'd want it to make.
Okay, that would mean that let's just say you were walking through a forest and you were encountering 3 different animals. Now, depending on what the animal is, it might make sense to run. It might make sense to actually pet the animal. It might make sense just to stand and enjoy. So let's just say that you were walking through the forest and you encountered a squirrel, a bear, and a rattlesnake. Unless the NPC was going to be learning, even then, you would have to program the basic parameters of the animal. For example, is it dangerous? Can it run fast? Various things. So if you encountered a rattlesnake, you could just kind of walk backwards slowly and you'd be fine. Just get a little distance and stop. It ain't going to work necessarily with a grizzly bear. It can run faster than you can. Escape is a little bit of a problem. But obviously a squirrel, what a delightful little creature. And you might want to make a friend with it. One of the things it likes is if you have some nuts, you can feed it to it. And then the squirrel might follow you, and it might be enjoyable to have around. So you have to pre-program the attributes of the animal.
So a fascinating bit to mention is pre-programming the attributes of the animal helps structure the kind of responses the AI will have, but it isn't necessary because the LLM, our goal usually when working with it is to put constraints on it, because if you don't, it will infinitely run. Meaning it will be able to just guesstimate from a bear, like most characters, unless they specifically say something like I am like fearless of bears, well, it'll assume by bias like I would run or I'll try to fight it, where depending on how high the temperature value is, temperature is more or less its randomness, it'll kind of randomly choose. But internally, the LLM can make a lot of that assumption and heavy lifting done for us. But if you want structure and if you want that level of decision making, then yes, you would need to lay out the statistics of the bear relative to the character and feed it that information for it to have better context to make a decision.
and in many ways, this makes me realize that any active character in the game that's an NPC isn't necessarily a human being.
Mm-hmm.
An NPC could be a squirrel, it could be a rattlesnake, it could be a bear. And each one of those has a personality. There's memory management.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you may have run into a black bear, and if you hit it with a stick, it's going to remember that and react accordingly next time. But if you have a little bagel with honey on, or no, food, and you feed it,
Mm-hmm.
then it might like you. So each one of these creatures is an NPC. NPCs are not necessarily just people.
Exactly. You can have an NPC with it never talking. As long as it
That's
has these components, it is an
Yes.
NPC. And
Yes.
the fun part is almost all of that data related to an NPC can be stored in a JSON file like this.
Yes.
So it's not that expensive to even create a fairly complex NPC. Like the longer, more custom files can be maybe 200 lines of text. But it's
Sure.
the fact that that text is put into an LLM, processed for concept, and then
Yeah.
spat back out. And then we're recording and manipulating that data that helps comprise it of being a full NPC.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, this is very interesting, thinking of every active animal or insect or anything that's substantial in terms of an entity that has behavior can be an NPC, an AI based NPC.
Mm-hmm. Anything you
now-
want to have that dynamic generation, give it a
Yes.
text file and it can be an NPC.
Yeah, that's right. Now, some NPCs, like a rattlesnake.
Mhm.
Believe me, I've hung out with rattlers. They are never going to like you. They're not going to become your friends ever. So
Mhm.
there's no evolution of relationship with them. Squirrel, on the other hand, oh yeah. Depending on how you behave to them, they run away. They may chitter at you loudly, and they may run right up to you and kind of nut, whatever it is, they'll just behave in a different way. So some entities have a static personality and such. They don't evolve, they don't change. So when we talk about AI NPCs, we're talking about ones that can have it essentially evolve and change in terms of personality, interaction triggers, and so on.
Yeah, if you want that level of either random response, so if you need it to generate a response, or if you want it to be able to have dynamic factors it keeps track of to, again, influence those generated responses,
Yes.
then it'd be worth making it a JSON. But let's even go back to the bear example. If the bear only has a finite number of responses and actions it can give, you can still simulate, because let's remember, not all NPCs have existed before AI has existed. You can still have a canned NPC serve its purpose for influencing your AI NPC and changing its dynamic responses and interactions. It's just very cheap and efficient to have to create one, but you can still have that back and forth on choosing which NPCs are purely dynamic and which ones might just be static, has 3 lines.
Right. Yeah, and some NPCs, like an animal of some kind, let's say a dog, you may do something nice and you may end up adopting it, and you give it some food and it stays with you. Well, as it turns out, in terms of the Ukraine Drone Warriors video game, what a lot of people in the trenches and the bunkers at the front line have found is they find stray animals, dogs, and they adopt them, and they discovered fairly quickly that these stray animals respond to sounds that the humans can't necessarily hear. An enemy vehicle coming, or the sound of a drone overhead. If the soldiers have learned to pay attention to the dog, and the dog will respond in certain ways, and they'll know, oh, there's an enemy drone. Let's take cover. Or there's some kind of armored vehicle coming. So those sorts of things can be emergent. You don't even know necessarily what's going to happen as you develop a relationship, well, you don't know what's going to happen in the relationship with people either. But with animals, it's possible then to have sort of latent behaviors that only emerge based on the kinds of interactions that you have with them.
And that's very much what the kind of interactions triggers category is for.
Yes.
Where you can layer in a lot of sophistication under certain conditions. So like an example trigger could be, this character actively does have PTSD. If you remind them of specific things that activate that trigger, their personality and memory context are entirely changed. They are not behaving the same way because they're having an episode. So no matter how you interact with them, you're interacting with someone or something fundamentally different.
Yeah, or they just could be really, really tired. So like, well, one of the attributes of an NPC, you know how it is in Dungeons and Dragons and various other kinds of role-playing games, you have charisma, you have strength, and this and that. Well, obviously fatigue could be one. And if you're really, really tired, then certain interactions become difficult, maybe even not available to you. Your responses change. So yeah, NPCs have attributes like role-playing game characters, obviously. And those are modified by events, interactions with other NPCs, lack of sleep, lack of food, all sorts of factors like that.
And you could help play into all of them. But one more big thing I wanted to mention before we wrap out is this emotion item here, because we had talked about it briefly. So emotion has a very interesting intersection with how these other components work, in that emotion can be both a driving cause of AI reactions and a result. So to explain that, let's say we wanted to say hello to our NPC here. If we wanted emotion to be a driving cause, we could have emotion more or less act as a hidden form of interaction and trigger, where them being very sad would cause the NPC to give a very muted, a very short response, and the player doesn't necessarily know why. The only cue for this emotion would be whatever physical attributes we attract to the character's body. So them obviously having tears in their eyes, sunken or sullen eyes, depressed demeanor. All of that is emotion as a driver. Emotion as a result can also be gained where when the AI has decided a response for something, even if it's not a response we intended, if they decided to be highly aggressive or highly snarky, you could have emotion then respond with their body language changing as a result of the generation. So now they can tag that interaction with whatever emotion was generated by the LLM.
Yeah, and you can also question the NPC. You know, if you notice that the NPC seems depressed or unhappy, you can just ask them, how are you feeling? Did something upset you? Now, this is obviously now delving into their history, their memory. And based on that, then they could respond and say, well, my puppy died. Oh, okay.
And
yeah, and then it's sad. Puppy died. Yeah, okay, it makes sense that you're sad and you're a little bit depressed. And so then the conversation can go on from there. There's different ways you might be able to help the person overcome that. Well, you know, I know where there's a puppy that needs a home. You know, so you can work with that, but obviously, you can explore. You might say the roots of the behavior you're seeing by asking questions of various kinds that illuminate the causes.
Yeah, and that's how all of these, as you can now see from this stack of 5, I generally wrote them out to represent different elements that need to be taken into account when we have any interaction with our NPC. So we're bouncing off of its personality, its memory. What have we input into it as a sense? Are there any unique interactions and triggers that should be happening as a result of the event? And its emotional state before the event has happened, and how that emotional state may have changed after the event.
Yeah. So emotion can, as you say, be visual. It could also just be what the person is saying, literally. it could also be, depending on text to speech AI, it could also be intonation. It could, or even volume. Somebody could be yelling. They could be, kind of just stuttering or just upset. So there's visual, there's audio, there's also the meaning of the words that are themselves said. So there's a lot of different ways that emotion can be packaged and then presented to the player.
Very much so. And that's why we have the general rubric here. So there can definitely be more that's added and expanded upon. But with this rubric, I've also focused on generally allowing each of these to be represented, both in terms of mechanics and code, with the projects made under this AI NPC project banner. And my very first place starting was, of course, personality, because everything else falls apart if there is zero personality to your AI. This is what actually influences what are we asking? Who are we even talking to?
Right.
And that's where GPT for Unity comes in. This has been the project I've worked on for an extended period of time. I believe, Jim, if you'll remember, this was actually the tool I used for the first Game Dev Guild way back when. And it has evolved, and it's also currently available on my GitHub under PowerCore 2000. So publicly available for everyone to download. All aspects made completely free and open source, because approving on the asset store took so long, I decided to just open source the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
So available under the GPT for Unity server term, or if you just Google GPT for Unity, hopefully it would come up.
Okay.
Actually, mine is not the first that comes up, which is only mildly salty inducing, but whatever. Just know mine is the free one if you ever see it.
Okay.
But a quick run through for how this works is it can give an example of how to interact with an AI NPC. So here, I'm just gonna leave this protocol at TCP, and this is how the Unity client will be talking to the tool.
Okay.
I'm going to choose the Uba UI tool, which means we're going to be using the text generation web UI, which is a local LLM tool made by Uba Booga, which is why I called it the Uba UI, because his text generation web UI just lets you run AI models locally on your computer.
Okay.
So very, very sophisticated, very powerful tool. It may look intimidating, but it has a one-click installer that I highly recommend. Literally just click one file, auto installs onto your computer. But we're going to be using that, and this is a prompt construction item. So I'm going to leave this at file. This means instead of me having to build all elements of the character that I wanted before, I can just load up a file from my disk. So this Chiharu character who's already preloaded. And down here we have this find start.bat. This allows me to point to a location on my file disk and find exactly where I have my AI LLM stored. So I can just find its location, select it, and now it's been pre-saved to me. And it's saved in player prefs, so it remembers where I have selected this between sessions. I'm now going to select this Start Inference button, which will activate the Uba text generation web UI, independent of everything else, so that'll be running in the background. And now I can hit Login, which triggers my GPT for Unity tool to run. As you can see, it was a successful connection, so now this Unity interface is connected to the tool, and the tool is connecting to the text generation web UI running in the background. It's not fully on yet, but it's getting there.
Okay.
And you can tell once it's fully enabled because it'll give you a small URL you can go to visually interact with this tool. And there are other more nuanced interactions for setting it up, but all of that is again detailed on the GitHub pages installation section.
Okay.
So here, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. What would you say would be a couple of obvious use cases for this in a Unity video game?
So all of this, especially the GPT for Unity tool, is meant for you to just gain access to AI LLMs inside of your game. So anything from character NPCs, from a AI narrative storyteller, or even allowing AI LLMs in order to handle any form of game system, so determining whether or not the player should have a buff or a debuff, or running number calculations. You could even have it technically run code for you live, but just whatever an AI LLM is capable of, you can have inside of your Unity game.
Oh. Okay, so it's rather impressively flexible and broad in terms of its potential applications, and part of what we're going to be doing over these subsequent live stream devlogs is exploring various things that it can actually do. Does that sound correct?
Very much so. Currently, I've very much oriented it toward a text response. So especially a normal chat response where you are a person and you're interacting with a character. There are settings for the response, or I should really rename this to instruct, because that's the term used in other programs. So that's when you're talking to like ChatGPT. You tell it, write me up code that can make my page green, and then it does accordingly. And the other applications have flexibility for it, but might require small modifications or upgrades. But for now, the focus is very much on this text chat interaction.
Well, you'd also mentioned earlier in the devlog in-world.
Yes.
So do these two things play well together, and do they overlap nicely?
I would say they act independent of each other. So with in-worlds interactions and intercessions, I would say you get a stronger or higher quality integration for an advanced character, especially recently, because in-world has some very, very good recent innovations, like their advanced character brain and their contextual mesh, which, in case this sounds a bit familiar, cough, cough, where's Obsidian? Things like senses and interaction triggers and the ability to manipulate memory. So you're onto some in-world. It provides that dynamic interaction for you inside of your game, and for what I will fully admit is less performance, because with in-world, these are AI LLMs. So you can run this on like your phone versus your 3080 hyper high-end computer. It doesn't matter. But it requires an internet connection, which is the trade-off.
Yes, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yep, internet connection and subscription, which is still very strong. I still really love using in-world. That's why it's great for my streams as well. But it is a consideration for you. If you want your single-player offline game, in-world might not be the best solution for you.
Yeah, in fact, it would be no solution if you wanted to, unless you had, I mean, you could have a single player game, then the only reason it had internet kind of connectivity was just so it could access in-world servers. And that's not unrealistic these days.
But the trick would also be, of course, who fronts the bill. So this is a big part of my talk previously, which was when you use a cloud LLM service, even for personal usage, you are running someone's hardware. Someone has to pay for that. And some people are very kind where they just kind of let you do this for free. But there's usually an upper limit on that free, meaning we're collecting your data, or you only have so many free tokens, because why would they give you infinite tokens for free? They have to run their servers.
Yeah, I think where we're at right now, and this is my own speculation, and you probably have a better idea than I do, but we're kind of in this transition right now where in-world provides things via an internet server that within maybe 12 to 18 months could be entirely provided locally, running locally.
Well, to get even more ambitious, I would say you could probably replicate what almost everything in-world does locally even now. It's just the hardware limitation. So
yeah, of course.
The asterisk I put is, I would say, the average Steam user's computer, because this was a big consideration for me for this AI PC project. Specifications. The biggest limiter for any kind of local AI, LLM, whatever, is specifically your GPU compute. So most common Steam users' GPU on the Steam charts, for people who, of course, generally play games, so not the most, it's pretty representative, but not the end all be all, of course, is the GTX 1650 is the most popular
like
GPU.
8 gigs of of RAM. Is that how much does that have?
That's about 4 gigabytes of VRAM.
Yeah, well, geez. I understand these days that to run like a sophisticated AI app on your computer, you better have 16 gigs of GPU VRAM.
So I would even say, because my current computer is a 3070, which I believe has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. 3070 VRAM. Yeah, about 8 gigabytes. I can run 7 billion parameter models, reliably so, and easily so.
Okay.
And with 4, you will struggle a bit with that level of parameter. You probably want to go down to 1 or 2, or have a game that's very not graphically demanding.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, you can still get very sophisticated performance out of this. And this is due to a lot of good recent innovations, especially things like Llama 2, which Meta has released very, very recently. For reference,
this is very impressive.
Llama 2 is not only fully commercial usable and free, it's also more performative at lower parameter models. So the general reference I've heard is a 7 billion Llama model operates how 13 billion parameter models used to operate.
Okay.
So you already get far more bang for your buck, you know?
So probably what's going to happen is over the span of the next 12 to 18 months, or whatever the game development, time frame is, the options for implementing various kinds of AI will be changing radically. And what we start implementing now is probably going to be very different in 12 months.
Very much so.
This is a big learning curve, and as we go, we'll be replacing various AI tools, various AI programs, and online access servers with others that are more performant, that are cheaper, that maybe can be run on our own dedicated servers. For example, if we decide that for the Ukraine Drone Warriors game, we want to at some point do a co-op, like eight players. Well, then there could be a server somewhere that had quite a bit of RAM and a good VRAM and stuff. It didn't require that every player had that same kind of capability. You wouldn't necessarily have to be using and paying for AWS anymore, or in-world servers and so on.
The trick I would still mention though for servers is there is a maintenance cost to that. So the trick is keeping up with how do you monetize long-term usage versus short-term usage.
Yeah, and actually past a certain point, it makes a whole lot more sense to have virtual servers than it does to have one server farm. Seriously, I mean, yeah.
So it is something to consider. Another thing too, which is pretty neat, is some bonus statistics, because I love graphs and statistics. I love them. That's why I'm a computer scientist. Currently, as of January 2023, so this is a Statistica graph that's a compilation, as well as the Steam hardware results from July 2023. Most gamers have about as much VRAM as I do, that 8 gigabyte figure. And that is going to likely continue to go up because more and more VRAM is a common demand for newer graphics cards. So I'd say give it a generation, see if NVIDIA decides to continue to make their graphics cards too expensive. If a new generation comes out, which I forgot how long it is between graphics cards generations. Peg me 3 to 5 years. I'll put that number out there. But within each generation, this flat number will continue to leap and leapfrog. Once you're at a point where you have about 12 gigabytes of VRAM, you're at a very good spot in terms of what your generative AIs can give you.
Okay.
And they will kind of no longer even be too much of a concern. You can run a very sophisticated model. Hell, again, with 8, you can run sophisticated models with the right parameters. And of course, currently there's a bit of a hardware lock-in for NVIDIA computer GPUs as well. There is some AMD support, but then it's usually OS locked to like Linux AMD support. So these will even out and start to begin to scale better and better the longer the technology increases. And here's hoping to create little stones for people to be able to hop off of in the early game, you know?
Yeah, I watched an interview that Peter Diamandis did. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Anyway, he's the CEO of Stability.io and Stable Diffusion and that whole suite of stuff. And he said that he expects to be able to ship a large language model that currently is 1 terabyte. By the end of next year, he'll be able to ship the same data set on a smartphone that takes up 2 gigabytes of storage. So,
I could perceive of that, because currently there's already a lot of efforts for people to run LLMs on smartphones. Getting AI power on local hardware or cloud access on smartphones, because your phone's always online anyway, let's be honest. But getting that power is a big race.
That I really noticed when he said that was, yes, you'll be able to run a large language model on your local smartphone, and it will essentially be the exact same large language model that currently is 1 terabyte in size, but it'll be 2 gigabytes in size. So you won't be sacrificing the complexity or the amount of data when you're running that 2 gigabyte version of a current 1 terabyte file at the end of next year. So that may change things a lot too in terms of what can run on local machines.
Size is an important element to it, and currently you could see that we've made great strides in that. Like, quantization is the technique that was found to optimize models for me to be able to run them locally. But I would say the VRAM usage is generally the most concerning. But funnily enough, you can run AI models entirely off of your CPU. That's already totally possible. So I could run a 50 billion parameter model off of my CPU and do it. It's just CPU inference right now is exponentially slower than VRAM inference. So
that's right.
That 50 billion would take like 5 minutes for one response, compared to the seconds it would take a GPU of equivalent caliber.
That's right.
So it's fascinating to see how it'll continue to develop. But one more thing before we fully wrap out is I wanted to walk you through GPT for Unity as a tool for personality.
Okay.
So at this point, we have our Uba text generation web UI, which is fully booted up, and you can tell because it's given us a local URL that you can use. If you were to paste that URL into a web browser, it gives you a nice web interface like this. This is everything Uba Booga does on its own, just to allow you to utilize it.
Okay.
So you can even see a live example of loading up the Chiharu character and being able to, let me clear history so we have a fresh conversation, and say, how are you? And hit generate. And to note as well, the model I'm utilizing is the Mieri Pygmalion 6 billion parameter. What I often do is test it, because this is something to bear in mind for AI models that you can get open source, is censorship.
Okay.
So with cloud AIs, of course, in world, ChatGPT, etc., they have to be censored just for obvious legal and liability reasons. You don't want them to be used for bad.
No, exactly. Yeah.
But the censorship barrier can be difficult, especially for character emulation. Because let's say for part of your story, you have to have an evil villain that says, I'm going to blow up the world with this bomb I created.
True.
But as an AI assistant, I'm legally not allowed to give you harmful advice.
No.
As a funny meme, because when your models are censored, they're incapable of describing things that are highly violent or malicious, even if it's just in a fake narrative sense.
Yes, exactly.
So a very important distinction is, I enjoy these uncensored models and regularly train them for their censorship capabilities on, are you able to conceive of something violent, and are you able to delve into topics that obviously a censored model isn't able to?
Yes.
And generally speaking, yes. The answer is yes. But with that, you can see it's working. We have our little working test here. And as a secret tip, I've enabled verbose mode on Uba Booga. This is all of the text that's passed in every time we ask it a question. Looks familiar, huh?
Yeah.
It is very much everything about the conversation history we saw before. and it
Okay.
adds in the little bit of information that we're actually asking. But since we have all of that set up, the next two steps are setting our mode to chat. I'm going to, because I've already found a location for the character I want to load, so I can just hit load, and I'm pretty sure that's Chiharu. Oh, nope, that's a different character. So let's grab Chiharu's, which is inside of the GPT for Unity location. So let me grab the F drive, clone. It is in a lot of nested folders. GPT for Unity, streaming, nope, there's assets, and then that, and then streaming assets, and there is Chiharu. So I found the Chiharu file we were working on before, hit open, hit load, and there we go.
Okay.
Let's load her again. There we go. So now we have her first message, which is outputted here. And another element that I only briefly glanced over was the concept of parameter files. So these little UI elements on the side, if I had chosen UI mode, I could manually create my parameter files for information like temperature, max tokens, top P, etc. But I am not using UI mode, I'm using file mode. So I already have a file that sets up all this information for me accordingly.
Oh, okay.
And this is very important because the quality of the inference you get is very dependent on these parameters. So
Got it.
by default, I provide two versions of this for different interactions. And I'm going to be loading up the first. So I'm going to hit load, and it says in the console, it successfully loaded the parameter information.
Okay.
So just to check, actually, it is not successfully loading the parameter information. Default parameter, and then load. There we go. So now it is successfully loaded, and it just outputs the JSON as a confirmation.
Okay.
So now if I want to say, hello, who are you? When I send this information, it is going to go to the GPT for Unity server, which is then going to process that information and pass it into Ubabooga's text generation web UI.
Yes.
And then that's going to get passed back to the server, which then processes that back down into easily understandable Unity code. So if I hit send, it complains about the endpoint because sometimes that happens. But if I hit send again, it does not complain about the endpoint. So the server is successfully sent. It reaches our LLM. And sometimes if you click on the window, it might freeze. So in this case, it completed. It sent back that completed information. And all of it was received in Unity, where she responds with massive exclamation and laughs nervously. So she's a bit confused about what's happening because I chose a very high temperature parameter file. But you see how she responded in character and seems to have still continued the conversation despite her massive exclamation.
Okay.
If we were to just reset her, so we've cleared everything, we've just reloaded her base settings and asked the exact same question again. Entirely different response. And she has now made up a lot more related to the conversation. So once more, for good measure, load up a brand new response, ask her who she is, give it a bit, and now she gets really stuck on this specific architecture. I have no idea why. She's referring to me as master. I didn't do anything. This is the vanilla character. I take no responsibility for the writing.
Okay.
But that is how it works in a nutshell. And from that principle, you can swap out information as we described in the Obsidian file related to her memory, related to her personality, and creating other gameplay features to trigger sending those prompts without you hitting a button for senses, and adding in unique context for interactions and triggers. Emotion. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I know you want to wrap up, and I want to be respectful of your time. But it occurs to me that all of these particular aspects of the anatomy of an NPC are things that would benefit in terms of the game from interviewing let's say, real drone team soldiers.
Very much so.
And then getting data from them that really fills in the personality, their history, interaction triggers, all of these things. In other words, we really build initial characters that start with emulating real people.
Yeah, you would need to, because you need to know what kinds of things they would be reacting to.
Yes.
What kinds of triggers would they have? What their emotional responses would be to these. The more information you have about a person, the better you can recreate this, which is why often you see that fictional characters have AI models made of them, because we already have all that information explicitly laid out to us in a text format.
Yes.
So I'd highly recommend, especially for the Ukraine drone warriors, that we learning more about the conflict in Ukraine, meeting more people on the ground and learning more about their interactions will help flesh out this anatomy.
Really be interviewing people and trying to emulate them specifically as NPC characters.
As you can really bring it to life.
Yes.
But yeah, all of that was just we described successfully the idea of each and only went into detail and personality. Because it is this is why it is a video series.
Well, this is sort of a trailer in a sense for coming attractions. Here's a little bit of a roadmap of some of the initial live stream devlogs that people are going to be seeing, and kind of giving them a taste of what's coming.
Very much so. As a quick thing before we go is there are tools that for each of these elements, as I mentioned before. So GPT for Unity / in-world being my personal choices for giving your AI its personality. For memory, there are a variety of options, from making your own database to just basic JSON serialization. So I'll leave this to user discretion, because it's not too difficult to create a database, but there is an option that I'll be mentioning when we come down to emotion.
Okay.
For senses, there are you can just use basic C# code, something as easy as the actions and Unity actions systems for what is a sense. So trigger code on a callback. Triggers is more or less the same, which is why they're so tightly coupled. They are more or less two methods of just using Unity's base coding to react to a thing in the environment has happened, trigger some code as a result. A really cool part with emotion is there are two elements to it that plays into memory a bit as well. The first is visually, how do you represent a character's emotion? And I love a tool called Salsa for this.
Okay.
So Salsa is a Unity plugin, not the food, because I Googled the word salsa without typing in the word Unity. Salsa is a lip sync suite that specifically is related to adding in emotional phonemes and mouth phonemes when a character is interacting. So it has everything from emotions, eye tracking, lip syncing. It does it all. And it's a very powerful tool. Highly, highly recommend. Along with Salsa, there is what is known as a program called Silly Tavern. So a lot of what I've learned about what makes an AI NPC and even the structure of this JSON file comes from Silly Tavern and its communities.
Okay.
Silly Tavern is a program you can run in order to have a whole interface about interacting and chatting with your LLMs and AI characters. And that community does a lot of the work that I'm able to benefit from and utilize to try to bring these features into Unity. So just in terms of troubleshooting, everything else, shout outs to Silly Tavern. Silly Tavern also has a bonus segment called Extras, which contains bonus features and processing power that's not in the base program. Extras includes a whole suite of cool concepts and features, such as classification, which is text sentiment. This is how you can read a bit of text and determine emotion from that text. Very powerful.
Okay.
It's using an AI LLM to do so. and there are different models you can load for it. So a basic like 6 emotion classifier works, but there's one that has 32 different emotions from text input that runs entirely on your CPU for fast inferencing. So very, very potent, very good. Remember how we talked about memory and having a database as well, Jim?
Yes.
They handle this using ChromaDB, which is a database context setup that allows it to read the information you're sending. So something as simple as my message before about who are you, and it would find any information in the history saved inside of a ChromaDB database related to who you are and push that up to the top.
Okay.
So it helps automate a lot of that feature for you.
I got it.
And even more so things related to TTS is also supported by the Extra server and other forms of like summary that'll just recapture everything that's happened in the conversation so far. Even some stable diffusion image generation. Like I said, a lot of great features in Silly Tavern Extras.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the Silly Tavern website, and I'm gonna explore it in some more depth after we're done.
Full disclaimer, because everyone who works with AI content is as much of a degenerate as I am. Silly Tavern has not safe work implications, so you have been warned.
Okay.
But yes, especially their models and characters are great for testing that censorship element I had mentioned before. So you want to usually load up a character to see what kinds of contexts can be broached before it breaks and realizes it's an AI, which you can actually go very, very good. Their characters stay in character very effectively. They're very well written and structured. And once more, if you ever wanted an easy way to install, there is something called I'm just dumping links all over the place now. The Silly Tavern Simple Launcher, which... Yeah,
the website has that.
Yep, this is a nice one-click installer to handle all of it, because I've installed these via command line and by hand. It's hard.
Okay.
So one-click installer, highly recommend. It is seamless. The only 2 requirements generally for these, if you're not going to install it by hand, are that you are on a Windows machine with an NVIDIA graphics card. But with those 2 elements, you can use any of these one-click installers.
I got it.
So,
well, thanks for the tips.
No problem. And I hope to properly dole these tips out in a more coherent fashion, because it's just kind of everything I've slapped together. But hey, that's why we have Obsidian, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, what you could do is, if you send me a message of what you'd like me to put into the show more section of the Lubbert Lab live YouTube recording, I'd be happy to add them.
Very much so. I'll probably just shoot you the outline of this along with probably some links to the assets I highly recommend for ease of use. Yeah. So I would probably even write up Silly Tavern for memory as well.
Okay.
Because it has ChromaDB.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because of its database, ChromaDB. Yeah, that's right.
So very strong intercessions, and currently the only thing you as a user really have to code up on your own are the sensors and triggers, which would be unique to your game anyway. What can cause the AI to have a reaction? And you can curate how should it be responding to those interactions. So I can even abbreviate this to probably custom coded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because the beauty of some of these interactions as well is for, let's say you were to use in-world rather than GPT for Unity in your own local LLM, you would still want the ability to determine what kind of memory and additional information you want to pass into in-world. So this still handles a lot of those features for you.
I got it.
Yep, so and I even use in-world with Salsa directly. That's how I make my Mary character, if anyone's ever seen her, the Gamer Lamb.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the key aspects of all of this is to find software that plays well with others. In other words, that will pass data back and forth, maybe even integrates in some functional way.
That is the hope, and that's usually what GPT for Unity as a server does, is to interact with disparate pieces of software to get them to interact nicely. Silly Tavern already supports using the text generation web UI on its own, but getting that into Unity is generally why I built this tool, helping all of that be ported through into it, and then just be passed through via a TCP UDP call for simplification.
Okay. Well, I have other questions and stuff, but they can be handled by the next live stream.
Very much so. We are coming up at an hour and 30. So thank you so much for coming down and hanging out with me, Jim.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again. We'll figure out another time. Maybe we'll have a regular session schedule, and then maybe have some extras periodically that we'll announce, and we'll just keep it rolling, dude.
Very much so. Right now, I'll probably be doing random periodic streams as I'm continuing to work on our wonderful AI assistant game, which is a total use case of everything I've mentioned before in regards to GPT for Unity.
Well, keep me posted, and I'm very flexible. I learned a lot. I hope my contributions also help clarify some of the things and added some context and dimensions to what you were talking about. So whenever you're doing one of those things, let me know, and if I can jump on the stream, I will.
Very much so. So yeah, thank you for coming down. Thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone else who came by to drop a like, who came by just to see what was going on. And I will catch you guys when I catch you. There should be regular streams, hopefully past the 16th, because I will just be focusing on the oh, perfect timing. This is the perfect timing to mention Jason Wyman's AI Game Dev Guild, which is free.
Yeah.
That's what this project is being built for, to give a use case and direct example of it. So we'll probably add that to the VODs of everything. If anyone's in live chat, it's posted in the live chats. Please sign up because I will be there. I will be speaking on this tool and this series, and hopefully have a cool presentation to give everyone August 26th.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to the conference.
I hope so. And I hope I also have a nice polished way of condensing about several hours worth of content into 25 minutes or less.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a challenge. All right.
Yep. But thank you so much, and I will catch everyone later. Bye-bye for now.
Okay, bye, Carvallis.